Let's bring back the front bench to dig into the challenge. Stoltenberg's, call places on the feds. Brian Gallant, Gary Marr, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benziar here. Tom, we've talked a number of instances about defense spending and that target. I have to say, I've interviewed Mr. Stoltenberg a number of times. This is the most unequivocal he's been. The fact that he brought up the size of Canada's GDP, the size of our economy, said to me his message is basically, you can afford it. What do you take from that?
I take that Stoltenberg has just delivered the carrot version after Trump's stick version. You remember Trump's famous statement that people who didn't pay, he would tell the Russians to go invade them. Stoltenberg is being flattering towards Canada, reminding everyone that we're the only country in the world that fronts on 3 oceans, that we're the second largest country in the world. That plays to our own themes about ourselves. And he's saying, you can do better. You're a G7 country. You're a wealthy country. You've got a solid economy. You've got to step up to the plate. Now, Mr. Trudeau's answer was largely rhetorical. Oh, well, we'll be there to step up, and we're doing better than the Conservatives did before us. Look, he's on the record, and he's never tried to deny that he said it, that Canada would never get to 2%. So it's against that backdrop that Stoltenberg is reminding him and all of us that that's an obligation that we've signed on to as part of NATO. And it is true that Canada is an important part of that alliance. We're a founding member. I think overall, Vassy, it was a very useful way to remind Canada that we have obligations, and Mr. Trudeau's got to take this more seriously. He can't just hide behind his next budget date. He's got to give a clear indication that he's got a plan to get to 2%. And Stoltenberg was saying 2024 for most of the parties who are recalcitrant so far, and if not, I want a clear date. So I think that Canada's really having a lot of pressure put on it right now to come up with a clear date.
The pressure, Rob, as we've discussed before, is not likely too domestic in its nature, right? We've spoken about how this has been an issue for a long time. Governments have failed to reach that target. They've said they will, but failed to reach it. And it hasn't necessarily cost them at the ballot box. But are there other considerations in this instance beyond just the domestic calculation? For example, what Tom spelled out, that the pressure from the head of NATO or our allies or kind of our stature in the world is impacted by these decisions.
Well, exactly, Vassy. And 1.29%, which is what it was as of last year, that's not 2%. Great, it's more than it was in 2015, but it's not 2%. And when you have, the ex-president of the United States saying incendiary things about, encouraging scofflaws to be invaded by Russia, that's not a great look, considering that, on our northern ocean, our Arctic Ocean border, on the other side of that is Russia. So we kind of don't want to have the Russians invading Nunavut, So I think it's problematic, and I think, yes, it's expensive to buy new equipment, but I think Canadians, by and large, would be supportive because they want to see our armed forces with appropriate equipment. They want to see them safe. And they want to see them bolstered. It's a dangerous world. The invasion of Ukraine by Putin's Russia has shown us that we are safer in an alliance, and we have to pull our own weight. I think good for the Secretary General of NATO to say what he said to you. I think it's good that the message is clearly getting to the Prime Minister. Now, whether that means that the next budget is going to show a trajectory toward 1.5, 1.6, or whatever, it remains to be seen.
If the next budget, Brian, did show the trajectory to 2% over 4 years, let's say, you're looking at an extra $15 billion a year added to the deficit, which would certainly be an interesting thing to have to do against the backdrop of all the fiscal restraint that they're promising to exercise. But as well, I guess that informs the way in which the decision is made. Like, could they say, in 10 years we will, in 15 years? And does it matter, do you think, to our allies?
Well, I don't know the intricacies of how the Secretary General would react to sort of that far out, but at least it would be a date. At least you have to say that. And to Rob's point, look, yeah, we're not at 2%, but I also think it's fair for the Prime Minister to make the point that his government actually has increased the spending compared to the previous government. So I think that's a very fair argument to be made. That said, though, I know that the federal government, as many Canadians, are very focused on affordability, as well as sort of a new topic coming into the fold, the sort of Canada-U.S., the Team Canada approach, the Canada-U.S. relationship is important. And look, for all the reasons already discussed, it's important for Canada to step up for its own well-being and its own benefit, but it's also important for us to support NATO. It's important for us to have Canada be a part of it. But it's also very important for us, I think, to get to 2% for the dynamics with the U.S. Former President Barack Obama, when he was on the floor of Parliament, made the case that Canada needed to step up on things like this, and very specifically called out Canada. Now think about that as a Democrat, and he used the opportunity that he was given to make that point. And then, of course, as Rob said and Tom said, then we have former President Trump making incendiary comments about the issue. So why would Barack Obama do that? My humble opinion is because he feels the sentiment in the U.S. If other countries like Canada don't step up, we're giving a license to people like Donald Trump to really undermine these important multilateral institutions. And if we don't step up, it's going to make it that much easier for him to continue to be critical of them, undermine them, and ultimately, if he becomes president again, not fund them.
No government, though, so far, to everyone's point, Gary, including the previous one, the Conservatives, the Liberals. Yes, the Liberals are spending more, but it's still anywhere. And I looked through the data. Under Harper, it was between 1 and 1.4%. It's now 1.38. It's getting close to. It's still nowhere close to 2%. As we said, it would require a lot. Do you think that there is any chance, given the fact that they haven't done it before and they haven't lost votes for it, that they will still do it just because of it being the right thing to do, as our other panelists have laid out?
I think it is the right thing to do, and I think that what we should look for is leadership that says this is the right thing to do, not necessarily looking at doing it because there's votes in it or no votes for you in going to a 2% of your GDP for defense spending. We live in a world that's very different. I mean, for decades, we relied on the fact that we were surrounded by, in the South, the longest undefended border in the world and 3 oceans. Well, the world's not the same. And if you look at what, NATO allies are doing, I mean, you've got the French that have upped their game. You've got the Italians that are up their game. They're doing missions right now in the Balkans, in places like Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania. And that's the area that is the border on Russia between Finland and Poland. And they're finding that they're intercepting hundreds of Russian fighter jets and planes in the area. And so the Russians are testing to see what NATO's capabilities are. And so it strikes me that we can't ask our armed forces to do everything, but defense of the North is clearly something that you could spend some money on, and it would be an important part of expression of our sovereignty of the Arctic and our mutual defense that is required, which is the whole point of the NATO alliance.